Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into something super important, construction site safety in Canada.
Yeah, big topic.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at, how it's all laid out, kind of the framework for it all in those Canadian construction contracts.
Right.
So this is for anybody, really. If you're involved in construction projects at all, whether you're a client or you are a contractor, or even if you're a worker, out there on the site,
Absolutely. Yeah.
this is important stuff for you. And, you know, it might not seem like the most exciting thing, contracts,
Right.
but trust me, it's full of little details and, things that can really have an impact in the real world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when we talk about contracts in Canada, we're basically talking about CCDC contracts.
Yeah,
okay?
pretty much.
The Canadian Construction Documents Committee.
Those are the ones. Yeah.
Those are the ones that are the standard, the gold standard. So can you give us a little overview of why these contracts are so important?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, you hit it. They are really kind of the go-to across Canada. So, if you're working on a project, chances are good that you're going to be working with a CCDC contract. And I think in terms of safety, the big thing that these contracts do is they really lay out who is responsible for what.
Okay, so it's all about responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, when you get down to it, it's like, everybody's got their role to play in safety.
Right.
And these contracts, they really clearly define those roles.
Okay, so for example, I know there's like the CCDC2, which is for like stipulated price contracts.
Yeah.
And then there's the CCDC 5B, which is for construction management.
Yeah.
So these are like, they're not just telling you how to build the building, they're also telling you how to make sure everybody's safe while they're doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
all part of the package. And I think, I've worked on lots of projects, and I've seen these contracts used effectively to create, a really good safety culture on a site. And that's what it's all about. So, I'm definitely a fan.
Okay, so who bears the brunt of this? Like who's really in the hot seat when it comes to safety on these projects?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's the contractor, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
The contractor is they're the ones who are running the site, right? They're the ones who are in charge of the day-to-day activities.
Mhm.
So they really have to take the lead when it comes to safety.
Yeah, because they're the ones hiring all the people who are working there.
Exactly. Yep.
So, okay, what are some of the specific things that are in these contracts that kind of outline what these contractors have to do?
Okay, so there are kind of two levels to this. There's the general obligations, which are kind of like your overarching, broad strokes.
Okay.
And then you've got like your specific safety plan requirements.
Okay. Yeah.
So starting with the general obligations.
Okay, so let's start at the high level.
Yeah. It's basically saying, look, contractor, you got to make sure the site is safe. You got to make sure it's organized, and you got to make sure everybody who's working there knows how to do their job safely.
Okay, so that's like step one.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's your foundation, right?
Yeah.
So, this is going to include things like, having safety protocols in place, making sure everyone has the right PPE,
Yeah.
providing training, all that good stuff.
Okay, so that's setting the stage for a safe environment. But I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So on top of those general obligations, you also have the specific requirements for safety plans.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about those because I've heard a lot about these safety plans. They're super important.
They're key, yeah. And what's cool about them is that they're not just like generic one-size-fits-all things, right?
Okay.
And the CCDC contracts, they actually require the contractor to develop a site-specific safety plan.
So it's tailored to the individual project.
Exactly. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because every construction site's different.
Yeah.
You've got different hazards, different risks, different crews.
Right.
So, a safety plan that might work perfectly on one site might not be appropriate for another.
Okay, so this is all about being proactive.
Totally. You're trying to identify and mitigate those potential hazards before they become problems.
So for our listener who might be in charge of putting together a safety plan right now,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that need to be in there? Like what are some of the key elements?
Well, first off, you got to do a really good hazard assessment, right?
Yeah.
You got to figure out what the potential dangers are on that specific site.
Okay, so hazard assessment, that's like step one.
Yep. So, and that means looking at, all sorts of things. I mean, you've got your obvious ones. You're working at heights, excavation work.
Right, the physical stuff.
The physical stuff. But then you also got to consider, environmental factors. Like, what's the weather going to be like? What's the terrain like?
Yeah, those are important.
And you also got to think about hazardous materials, right? Are there any chemicals or anything like that on site?
Yeah, I mean, we see so many times where, people just don't do that due diligence,
Right.
and it can have like really, really serious consequences. Like forgetting about underground utilities or
Oh, yes,
something.
for sure. That's a big one. But yeah, so once you've done that hazard assessment, then you got to come up with a plan for dealing with emergencies, right?
Yeah.
So what happens if there's a fire? What happens if someone gets hurt? What happens if you got to evacuate the site? You got to have clear procedures for all of that.
Okay, so you got to have all those different scenarios laid out.
You got to have it all written down, contact information, assembly points, signage, the whole 9 yards.
So if something does happen, everybody knows what to do.
Exactly. You don't want to be figuring it out on the fly, right?
Right.
In the middle of an emergency. And then the other thing that a good safety plan is going to include is a system for doing regular safety audits and inspections.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where we're getting into the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, just making sure that everybody's staying on top of things, right? And, it's not just about checking boxes. It's about, actively managing safety on the site,
Yeah.
looking for potential problems before they turn into incidents.
The documentation is really important here.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's proof that you're doing your due diligence.
Yeah.
It's evidence that you're taking safety seriously. So I mean, we've been talking a lot about the paperwork here, the plans, the procedures.
Right.
But at the end of the day, safety is really about people, right?
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to. So how do we actually make sure that, everybody's understanding these rules and that we're doing everything we can to prevent accidents?
Well, I mean, training is obviously huge, right? You got to make sure that everyone on the site knows how to do their job safely.
Okay, so this isn't just a one-time thing. Like, here's the manual, go read it.
No, no, no. It's got to be ongoing, toolbox talks, refresher courses, all of that. And it's got to be tailored to the specific hazards of the project.
Right.
But then you also need to have like a culture of open communication, right?
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you want people to feel comfortable speaking up if they see something unsafe.
Okay, so if they see a potential hazard,
Yeah,
you want them to be able to say something.
exactly. You don't want people to be afraid to report hazards.
Right.
Because, that's how you catch things early
Yeah.
before they become problems. And then the last thing is, monitor and keep records, track incidents, near misses, all of that.
Okay, so you're saying use data to improve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to get better at something, you got to measure it. So track your safety performance, analyze the data, and figure out where you can improve.
All right, so for our listener out there, just to kind of wrap things up here,
Right.
what would you say, like, the big takeaway is?
Well, I think the main thing is that, construction site safety in Canada, it's a shared responsibility, right? It's not just on the contractor. It's not just on the owner.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to do their part. And I think these CCDC contracts, they provide a really good framework for doing that. They lay out the responsibilities, they set the expectations. So, it's a good starting point.
Yeah, well said. Well, here's a thought-provoking question for you and for the listener to think about.
Okay.
Beyond contracts, beyond the regulations and all that stuff, what are some of the ways that, maybe in the future we can really push the envelope when it comes to safety?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm not sure. Lots to think about there.
Lots to think about. All right, well, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening, everybody. And until next time, stay safe out there.